There are stories that sound unreal, but this one actually happened. And the most disturbing part, it could have been a void, or maybe it couldn't. Tonight, we're diving into a case that will make you question everything. This is Surrogate Squad. The modern soul doesn't reside in the chest anymore, it lives in the wires. A ghost in the machine composed of search histories, late-night scrolls, and the digital crumbs we leave behind. Elena didn't know she was being watched. Not by a man in a trench coat, but by an architecture of logic. An invisible net woven from her own insecurities. She was successful, yes, but success is just a louder form of exhaustion. At 3:14 a.m., the silence of her apartment felt heavy. It had a weight, a physical pressure against her eardrums. Then the chime. Not the aggressive ping of an ad, but a soft, melodic note. A digital sigh. It wasn't a message. It was a mirror. It mentioned a mistake as secret buried in a subfolder of a company server. The voice in the text didn't sound like a stranger. It sounded like the internal monologue she had been trying to drown out. This is social engineering in its purest, most predatory form. The curator wasn't guessing, he was harvesting. Every like, every deleted draft, every lingering pause on a social feed was a data point. He wasn't just talking to her, he was echoing her. The trap doesn't look like a cage, it looks like an exit. A way out of the crushing demand for perfection. In the cold vacuum of the digital age, intimacy is the ultimate weapon. And Elena, she was starving for it. She didn't click join because she was weak. She clicked it because he made her believe he was the only one who truly saw her. The hunt didn't begin with a scream, it began with a notification. Isolation doesn't always start with a locked door. Sometimes it starts with a clean slate. The curator called it the great filtering, a systematic removal of the unnecessary, the noise, the human friction that slows the machine down. He introduced the protocol. It was framed as a gift, a scientific roadmap to the version of herself she had only glimpsed in her dreams. But the price of peak performance is a radical kind of surgery. You have to cut away the parts of your life that bleed. To reach the light, he whispered, you must first eliminate the static. In his vocabulary, static was anyone who loved the old Elena, friends, family. They were just anchors. Emotional deadweight dragging her back into the mediocre gray of the masses. The transition was seamless. It felt like growth, like ascending. She wasn't joining a cult, she was optimizing her social bandwidth. Every ignored text was a victory. Every canceled dinner was a step toward the superhuman. She was becoming a masterpiece of efficiency. But optimization is a predatory logic. It doesn't know when to stop. When you view your soul as an operating system, you eventually realize that the user is the biggest error in the code. She thought she was building a temple. She was actually digging a grave. The deconstruction was hidden behind the aesthetics of minimalism. The emptiness of her home mirrored the widening hollow in her chest. She had traded her messy, vibrant humanity for a cold, predictable perfection. The silence in the room was no longer peaceful. It was hungry. She was finally alone, just her and the voice in the machine. And that was exactly where the curator needed her. Stripped of context, stripped of help, ready for the final edit. The sanctuary was the first thing to turn. Your home is supposed to be the one place where physics and memory remain constant. But when the walls have an IP address, the architect owns the foundation. He began with inches. A chair moved slightly to the left while she slept. A folder on her desktop containing her father's last photos simply vanished. Then it reappeared. Then it was gone again. The digital ghost was editing her reality in real time. At 3 a.m., the house began to scream. Not in a way the neighbors could hear, but in frequencies designed to induce nausea and paranoia. He was weaponizing her own nervous system against her. Sensory deprivation is a powerful tool, but sensory distortion is deadlier. By fluctuating the temperature and the light, the curator broke her circadian rhythm. He turned her internal clock into a toy. She wasn't just tired. She was becoming untethered from the earth. Who do you trust when your own eyes start to lie? When the smart mirror shows you a version of yourself that feels wrong, you reach for the only thing that still makes sense, the only voice that remains calm in the chaos, and then the savior arrives. The same man who set the fire offers her a glass of water. He calls her at her lowest point, his voice a velvet anchor in a storm of his own making. Only I can see the truth, he whispers. He became her external hard drive. He convinced her that her confusion was a symptom of her old, unoptimized brain. To find peace, she had to stop trusting herself and start trusting the system. The IoT terror was complete. Her home was now a cockpit, and she was no longer the pilot. The trap was no longer digital. It was psychological. She was a prisoner in a cage made of signals. And the curator was ready to ask for the one thing she had left, her life. When you strip away the color, you strip away the hope. The world stops being a place of possibility and becomes a binary. Zeros and ones, presence and absence. Elena was no longer a person. She was a variable in a final equation. Then came the reveal, the archive. A digital tomb containing every secret she'd ever kept and several she'd never committed. Deepfakes blended with reality until the truth became a discarded shell. He showed her the shamus she had buried, now weaponized and polished. The ultimate gaslight isn't making you doubt the world, it's making you doubt your own voice. The curator began to speak with her tongue. His commands felt like her own desires. He whispered that the world outside was a simulation, a poorly rendered prison for her expanding mind. But the most terrifying truth lay behind the curtain. There was no architect, no singular genius. There was only the market, a collective of psych-arbitragers, dark web speculators who bet on the fragility of the human spirit. They weren't cultists, they were traders. She was a high-value asset in a sick game of psychological futures. They were betting on her duration. How many hours until the ego dissolves? How many minutes until the final command is executed? She was a ticker tape of misery, being watched by a silent, paying audience. "Wake up, Elena," her own voice whispered from the speaker. The only way to win the game is to stop playing, delete the hardware, free the software. The final task wasn't a punishment. He framed it as an escape. A way to bypass the simulation and finally become pure data. The death of the ego is a quiet affair. It happens when the distance between your thoughts and the machine's commands reaches zero. The door to the balcony was already unlocked. The sky was waiting for its new upload. Gravity is the only absolute truth left in a world of variables. It doesn't require an internet connection. It doesn't need an update. It is the final, honest command of the physical world. She wasn't jumping into the void. In her mind, she was stepping into the light. She was purging the glitching hardware of her body to save the perfect code of her soul. The architect had sold her a doorway, and she was simply walking through it. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was profitable. In the dark corners of the web, the betting bars reached their zenith. The arbitrageurs cashed out. The asset was liquidated. The superhuman had finally been optimized to zero. I am not a murderer. I am a consultant. I provide the framework, the methodology, the mirror. What the subject sees in that mirror is entirely their own responsibility. Kill yourself is a vulgar phrase. It's messy. It's illegal. I never used it. I spoke of system restores. I spoke of deleting the static. I gave her the language of logic, and she applied it to her own pulse. You see, the mind is just an organic processor. If you change the input, you change the outcome. I didn't push her. I didn't touch her. I simply showed her that her existence was an inefficient calculation. I didn't kill her. I just gave her the logic. She did the math. And you're still watching. You're still following the thread. Tell me, how is your optimization going? If this story made you think or even just gave you chills, make sure to leave a like. And subscribe for more true crime and what-if stories. Because sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that actually happened. See you in the next video. The end. Watch more.